How do I create urgency on a high ticket sales call? That is a question that we are going to dive so deep in this video that you will be mind blown where the conversation ends up going. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek. You think you have a problem with not creating urgency. What you actually have a problem with is a number of internal leaks, what I call internal money leaks. As you solve those internal money leaks, which you're going to watch me do in real time with one of the students inside the Unicorn Closer Mastermind, you not only solve the external problem of how do I create urgency, but you solve so many more other things in your sales and in your life that by flipping the script, no pun intended, and not looking to just solve an external thing. What do I say? When do I say it? How do I say it? To create urgency, and actually working on the internal things, you will realize that you have been playing the game all wrong. So buckle in, put your seatbelt on. This is going to go very deep, and I'm excited for you to watch this training. Let's crack in. So before we had this one-on-one call, I said for you to spend a little bit of time kind of thinking about what you feel is either the biggest challenges you're having or the biggest opportunities. So do you have one of those that stood out more than anything else as far as a leak for you at the moment with closing?
I have one that stands out in terms of internal mastery, and then I have one that really stands out for the discovery.
Beautiful. And if you were to say over 10 calls that were leads that could have closed, which one of those would you say is costing you more deals, or is it 50-50?
I think it's the discovery problem that's costing me more deals.
Okay, so that's the scriptless side. And if you were to put a number on it, as a percentage or a ratio, would you say it's, 80-20, 70-30? What would you say?
In terms of what?
In terms of between these two big challenges, one is the discovery and the scriptless side, and one is the internal. How much of it is weighted towards the sales call, the scriptless side, as far as losing deals?
I think it is mostly like 80-20, the
Okay.
scriptless things.
Okay. Interesting. And have you actually sat down, let's say over last week, and actually thought about how many deals you should have closed that could have closed that you didn't close because of either of these two things? Have you thought about that number?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah,
is that number?
probably one per day.
Oh, one per day. And how many days are you working,
Well,
taking calls?
I'm working 6 days a week right now, but I've only had like one good shot per day. I've only been taking like a couple of calls per day. I've only had one good shot. And I feel like out of the one good shot I've had per day, I haven't hit the past couple that I should have this week. And I feel like it's because of the script list issue that I'm having.
Okay, got it. So that's 6 days. So you saying over the last 6 days to last week, there's about six calls that could have closed that didn't close because of this issue.
Like five, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
five or six. Okay, so six
Yeah.
days, five or six calls. And then these are calls for your own business, right?
No, no.
No. Okay, these are not your own business. Okay, so these are fitness calls though, fitness offer.
Yep.
Okay. And what is the deal size on average? Like, let's say you got a paid in full for each of those five. What is it worth per call?
So paid in full is worth 2,900.
That's the package price, or that's your commission?
Oh, sorry, that's the package price. My
Okay,
commission
got it.
would be I get a bonus, so my package or my commission would be 390 for a paid in full.
Okay, so 390 for paid in full. And what is it if it was on a like a payment plan, or does it change depending on the payment plan?
Yeah, it would be somewhere between 320 and 390 for a payment plan.
Perfect. Okay, so somewhere between 320 and 390. So let's just go with 350 for somewhere in the middle. And let's say there was five over the last week. So that's 3,500 divided by two, 1,750. Does that sound about accurate?
Mhm.
About 1,750. Okay. And then my next question is, Is this a new challenge or has this been going on for some time?
Well, I've only been closing since January, so I'm just new in my journey. I would say that as I've grown and progressed to where I am now, only 2.5 months in, it's just the one that I know is at this point holding me back.
Okay, my question was not very clear. So thank you for clarifying that. What I mean is, I know you're brand new. Sometimes, sometimes what happens with closers is whether they're learning scriptless selling or they're doing any type of sales methodology. When they first learn it, it's kind of like adrenaline and momentum that they're just crushing it. They're closing everything. And then for some reason, a month later or 6 weeks later, they're like, I don't know what to do anymore. And it's the question is, has this been the same issue pretty much to the same level from January, or has it become worse recently, or just come up recently, or has it been the whole time?
Yeah, so from the start, I feel like I don't know. I never knew what I was doing. Like I just started winging it from day one. I want to say
Yep.
winging it because I followed you before I started closing. So I tried a version of scriptless selling from the start. I don't know if I knew what my issues were in the beginning, but this is something where as of lately, I don't know if it's gotten worse or as I've gotten better, it's just the only thing that hasn't gotten better. So I don't know if I have an exact answer.
No worries, not a problem. So let's not talk about then, has it gotten worse or has it gotten better or has it stayed the same? What about your awareness of it? Have you been aware from day one that this is a leak or it's just become apparent recent?
Yeah, definitely become apparent more recently.
Okay, when did it become apparent?
I would say probably over the past couple weeks.
Okay, so past couple of weeks. And why did it become apparent?
I feel like as I've gotten better, I've um just been able to like better self-evaluate and like think through my calls when I'm getting off of them. And just recently it feels like I've been hitting a lot of the other things that I think that I should be hitting, except this one area.
Okay, so previously, if I'm understanding correctly, you were winging it with some form of scriptless selling, but because you didn't actually know, I guess, what it should be like or shouldn't be like, you weren't even able to self-evaluate where you were going wrong.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
but now you're pinpointing that, and now you just need to figure out why is it happening and how do I fix it? Is that accurate?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. If you listen to a sales call or perhaps the last five sales calls over the last 5 days, can you pinpoint exactly where it's happening? You're just not sure what you should have done, or you're aware that you did something somewhere in the call, but you're not exactly sure where it went wrong. Which one is it?
I think it's a little bit of a mix. I would say like today I had a call. I went back and reviewed it. I tried to pinpoint the spot and I pinpoint the spot where I think I could have addressed it, but I'm not even 100% sure if that's where it is or if it is that exact reason, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Okay, so you're better at understanding where some things are going wrong, but you're not sure, is this actually the big moment where the call was lost, so to speak?
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. All right. I think I've got everything I need as far as background. So what is the challenge?
The challenge is creating urgency, which I know that in my last role play and the one that you posted today was like no urgency, no sale. And that was surrounding a lack of there being a burning problem. And since then, I've realized that even if there is a burning problem, I'm just not able to create a sense of urgency.
How do you mean if there is a burning problem, you can't or you're struggling to get the urgency? What do you mean by that?
So, for example, like I had a call where a woman, she's a police officer, and she told me it's life or death if she doesn't get in shape because she's putting her life and other people's life at risk. And I felt like, okay, that's a burning problem. Like she just told me it's life or death. Or other examples, similar where someone basically told me like this is something that absolutely has to change now. And I don't know if I'm not going deep enough on that burning problem, but I'm having a hard time then going from, someone saying it's a life or death matter to then creating enough urgency for them to actually take action.
Okay. What does urgency mean to you in a sales context? Like what are you expecting it's supposed to sound like when a prospect is in a position of urgency? Do you have an idea of like, okay, they need to say this, or they need to do this, or this needs to happen? Do you know what that is supposed to be?
I guess my only expectation of urgency would be like at the end of the call that they would move forward because, it feels like such an urgent problem that they need to take immediate action. So I don't know if know what to look for in the discovery that would connect those two.
Okay. Let me give you a simple term. You can write this down if you'd like. Urgency is, what is it costing them right now? The urgency then comes from, are they willing to pay that price another day, another week, another month? The price of something, if they don't, do anything with it as far as take action right now, only comes after you find out first all of the things it's costing them right now. Not the future things, not things 3 years in the past, but right now, over another 24-hour period, what is it going to cost them? The urgency is then just laying out to the prospect, this is what it's costing you, this is what it's costing you. As you said, this is what it's costing the people around you that you care about. Are you willing to continue another day paying that cost? That's essentially what urgency is. So the first part to any urgency is you have to stack the deck in your favor as far as these are all the different things it's costing them. Now, I say all of the different things. Sometimes there might be 5 things. Other times it might be one thing, but it's a massive, massive thing because you've gone so many layers deeper into what it really means. So like someone saying, I'm overweight. Okay, well, if you spend another 24 hours, it's costing you another day of being overweight. It's not really a big deal. Someone says, I'm overweight and I'm being a bad role model for my kids. Okay, so that's one layer deeper. So another 24 hours go by and you continue to be a bad role model for your kids. Is that enough to close a deal? No, because they've been a bad role model for the last week, the last month, 6 months, 12 months. So then you would say, okay, what do you mean by a bad role model to your kids? And you have to go deeper. And they might say, well, I've noticed that with my son, when we try and get him to eat healthy, he doesn't want to eat healthy. And I don't feel like I have the inner conviction, or maybe he could say that the son doesn't look up to the father when the father is trying to tell him, no, you have to eat broccoli, you can't eat sweets. You say, okay, well, how does your son look? Well, he's 9 years old. Okay, how does he look? Well, to be honest, he's a what would a father say to try and rationalize? Oh, he's big boned is what they would probably say. How do you mean big bones? Have you measured his bones? Then you have to challenge the prospect. You say, well, no, okay, so what do you actually mean? Well, he's only 9, so he's got a lot of, extra, growing weight or whatever. You say, what do you mean growing weight? And you have to keep digging and digging and digging. And then we go further and further and further until the point where probably the father will tell you some story about how he struggled with weight all of his life because his father struggled with his weight and then wasn't able to instill in him the right principles and philosophies and guidelines and habits. You say, okay, tell me how your life has been with struggling with your weight because your father didn't teach you these things. You then get into his dating life, you get into his social life, you get into his career. And then you would say, so how many more days are you willing to let your son have the very high likelihood of a struggled dating life, a struggled social life, a struggled financial life, because every single day that you continue to give him the wrong impressions and bad role modeling is further ingraining into him the same patterns that you had with your father. And you'd have to say something like that to him. So we have to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into what is it costing them. And usually the urgency is not an issue that a closer doesn't know how to get urgency, because really you're not actually doing anything. You're just laying the facts to the prospect and saying, how much longer do you want to do this? What closers really struggle with is continuing and continuing and continuing to go deeper and stacking the deck. That's part one. Also, though, once they've stacked the deck against the prospect, closers do struggle to draw that line in the sand and say, are you willing to go another day being this role model to your son? No. Why not? And even when you get the why not, you have to go even deeper on that. Okay, well, you've been willing to do that for the last 6 months. What's different now? And the point is, closers think that it's these waypoints along a call, like, okay, I've got the pain, done that. Okay, I've got the urgency, done that. Okay, I've got why the urgency is important, I've done that. The problem is, at any one of these three waypoints, you need to go so many more layers deeper. And it's not that the urgency is this like final crescendo. It's that each of these pieces stack together, and then it just becomes so absurd for the prospect to be willing to say at the end of the call, I'm not going to do it, or it's too expensive, or I have to pray on it, or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're saying it's basically like I'm not going deep enough for there to be urgency.
Number one is you probably aren't going deep enough into the stories and the specifics and the details. But number two, and so if you don't go deep enough, what I'm about to say for part two won't make a difference. It doesn't matter. But if you've gone deep enough and then you don't actually ask the prospect, are you going to go another day like this? If you've just got all of the pain and then you sort of write all the notes down and say, okay, great, I've got it. And then you say, okay, I'm clear on everything you've got going on, clear on where you want to be. If you like, I can roll into how we fix that. But you haven't asked the prospect to make a decision before you transition. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to try and get the prospect to make a final decision once you've already pitched them, told them the price, and then now you're trying to transact with them. They don't want to be told, what are you going to do, yes or no? But before you get to the transition, you have to be getting what's called tie downs, which is how many more days? Why not another day? Well, you didn't care before, so why do you care now? And you're challenging the prospect to be willing to not make a change. In other words, if you're going to consider not making a change right now, I'm going to challenge you on that. And then even when they tell you, no, I am going to make a change, most closers would just say, okay, great, brilliant, fantastic. And then you move on. You have to keep challenging the prospect. So number one is going deeper into the pain. And then number two is actually getting the prospect to say verbally out loud, and also to feel it. You've got to watch their body language, that they're done. They're not going to go another day continuing in that same cycle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think kind of a question that was forming in my head, but I think you kind of just answered it, would be like, how do I know when I've gotten deep enough to get to that how much longer question? But you kind of just said watching them and their body language. Is that something where it's purely just like based on how they're acting or reacting, that you got deep enough to even then ask that question?
Okay, well, let's define deep enough. Deep enough for what? What are we trying to get deep enough for, as far as the prospect having gone deep enough into their stories and the information they're giving you? What justifies, okay, we've gone deep enough?
Deep enough to for them to realize that they need to take action.
Okay, so deep enough to have a realization, deep enough for that realization to turn into action. What type of action?
If it's someone that I think is a fit, then I would obviously pitch them and then guide them towards taking action and solving the problem and moving forward with us.
How does that action compare to the direction and intensity of action that the prospect has been taking up until the call?
Probably it would probably be the most action that they've ever taken in their life in this area.
Correct. More action than they've probably ever taken. And because it's action they've never taken, it's action in a completely different direction to the direction they've been previously taking action. So we need to go deep enough that they have a realization. We need to go deep enough that they take a massive action in completely the opposite direction. What else do we need to go deep enough to kind of justify that someone's going to buy right now? What else?
Realization, massive action. I don't know if this would fall under realization, but I think kind of what I was saying to you the other day is like sometimes they might rationalize and like have a belief system or a mindset that's not serving them or in line with their goals.
Yeah, so we need to go deep enough that all of the previous weeds and mind viruses and rationalizations and excuses are not only exposed, but they are completely obliterated. Yep, that's a big one as well. So we've got to go so deep that all of those history of rationalizing and excuses is completely destroyed. What else? I want you to think about this is the prospect. They've been making these choices or lack of choices for a number of years, could be months, could be years, could be decades. And we want them to make a completely different decision. Going deep enough is what are the things that we have to overcome for them to make a decision? So, you beautifully said, overcome all their rationalizations, overcome all their excuses, overcome all their lies. We have to overcome the lack of action that they've taken. We have to overcome the direction of action that they have previously been taken. We have to overcome their lack of awareness. In other words, they hadn't even thought about this. They hadn't had realizations. What else do we have to overcome?
Any potential objection?
Okay. Any potential objections? Yep. So we have to overcome in how deep we go and how much commitment we get that they could say, I still need to think about it, or I need to get permission from someone else, or I need to run the decision by someone else. Yep. We have to overcome all of that. What else? There's at least two that are pretty significant that you haven't got yet.
Can you?
Is the program free?
No.
What does it cost?
So their willingness to invest?
Yeah, the money. We have to have gone so deep and got so much commitment that the money is insignificant compared to the depth that we've gone in the call. Yeah, one more. What else do we have to overcome?
Would it be something with like time or when they would act? Or did we already cover that?
Yeah, that could probably fall into action. In other words, they were previously spending 30 minutes a week exercising. Now they need to spend 5 hours. Yep. There's one very significant
If
one
they need help?
that would be the realization and the rationalizing and the excuses and the objection of, oh, I could do it all on my own. The final one that you didn't get is you have to have gone deep enough that they overcome the very real fact that you're a total fucking stranger on the call that's asking for their credit card number. So if you've gone one layer deep or two layers deep or three layers deep, and then you say, hey, can you give me your 16 digits on your card? They're like, no. Whereas if you've gone 9 layers deep into their life story, you're counterbalancing the thing that you have to get over, one of the things, which is you're a total stranger. I don't know you. I don't trust you. I just met you, which by the way are objections. I don't know you. I just met you. I don't make a decision on the call. Well, that's not true. People make snap decisions for everything in their life, but they make snap decisions when it's like an elastic band. It's been pulled enough that it snaps. And that pulling enough is how deep you're going into their stories. The specifics, the accuracy, focusing on things that matter rather than going down some line of questioning to things that don't matter. So overall, we've got how deep you go must overcome you, the closer, that you're a stranger, the money for the program, the realization, which we could call awareness slash lack of awareness, their action, both the intensity of it and the direction of it, any misdirection they have in their mind, such as excuses, lies, rationalizing, blaming, victim mindset, any objections, time, I need permission from someone else, I need to think about it. And so when you're trying to think, how do I know if I've gone deep enough? Think about these things very, very quickly, subconsciously. When you're on a sales call, think, have I had a deep enough conversation that this total stranger is going to give me a massive amount of money, having been completely unaware of the severity of their problem, whilst taking completely different action or lack of action, whilst being completely lost in all of their lies and excuses, whilst also having the get out at the end of the call that they could find any of a number of reasons to tell me they're not going to buy right now? Have I had a real enough and deep enough conversation? And a big part of that is, have I challenged the prospect enough through my tie downs that all of those things are irrelevant? They are going to make a decision and take action right now. So one thing that closers don't understand is, well, what does it even mean to go deep enough? And if you visualize it like a seesaw, All of the things that I just said are on one side of the seesaw. How deep you go needs to tip the seesaw in the other direction. So the fact you're a stranger doesn't matter. The fact it's $3,900 doesn't matter. The fact that they haven't taken any action towards exercise and now they have to exercise 4 hours a week doesn't matter. All of the stories and the reality needs to counterbalance that. And sometimes you literally need to tell that to the prospect. And there's nothing wrong with that. You try and do it through questions. But if at a certain point the prospect's like, why can't you just tell me what the program is and tell me the price? You say, well, I can tell you exactly why not. I would always phrase it as a question. Why do you think I'm not at the point where rolling into all those details is the next best step? Why do you think that? And they'll probably say, I don't know. It's okay, not a problem. Let me give you a minute to think about it. And you just don't reveal the answer. And then they probably come up with something. If they don't, you can say, if you'd like, I can share with you why rolling into all the details at this moment would not be the best thing for you or for us, and therefore wouldn't be aligned. Would you like me to share that? Yes. So here's the deal. At the end of this call, you're going to have one of two options: to do nothing about the challenge that you have right now and not work with us, or to do something about it. There's not really any other decision. Some of the things that are going to be in the way of you making that decision are, how do you feel about me? Do you feel like I care enough about you? Do you feel like I'm trying to sell you? Do you feel like I understand you? Do you feel like I actually am having a real conversation with you? Another thing is there is going to be an investment. And if that investment is not minuscule compared to the cost of your current situation, then there would be no reason for you to make that investment. And therefore, there'd be no reason for us to offer you to join the program. Another thing, if you have been in this position for 12 months, overweight, 320 pounds, blah, 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 it means that you haven't really been aware of what's going on, at least not enough that you did something about it in the past. I need to make sure that your awareness is 2020 vision, not so you can enroll, but so that you can actually make the right decision. If that decision with 2020 clarity is, I'm going to stay just the body shape that I have now and the excess weight, that's your choice. But right now, I know that a big reason that you're in that position is because you're not aware of the specifics and the details and the actual analysis of what's going on. Another thing is, the only reason you're in the position you're in right now and have been for so long is that the way you're thinking, the way you're feeling, the way you're talking to yourself, to other people, is not accurate. And what I mean by that is, if the way you were thinking, believing things, and understanding things was accurate, no one in their right mind would have allowed their body to get to your position and stay in that position. And so what that means, and I know that because we've done this a number of times with people just like you that are stuck, you're lying to yourself in certain ways, you're making excuses in certain ways, you're rationalizing that it's not that bad in certain ways. And I have an ethical responsibility to you to show you those truths. What you want to do with those truths is entirely up to you. But I am on this call to show you those truths. And I don't feel like we've got to all of those just yet. And then the final thing is, at the end of the call, because it would be doing something that you've never done before, and it would be committing to a decision, committing to action, committing to something that you've avoided for a long time, there would be a number of different things that you could conjure up on the spot. We could call them objections as to why you're not going to do anything. I know right now, looking at you and knowing that there's so many layers deeper that we can go into this conversation, that anything other than you doing something about this right now would not be in your best interest. But anything I say is going to go over your head in one ear and out the other ear. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I help you, if I can, come to that same realization. At this point, all of those different things that we have to overcome for you have not been overcome. And so until we get to the point where we've either decided, I'm so sorry, I've let you down, I cannot overcome the things that we need to overcome, you're not going to do anything about your situation, or we get to the point where we've overcome those things, then at that point, we will roll into all those details. Does that make sense? Yes. I've had to say all of that a number of times over the years on calls. Ideally, you don't want to explain it to the prospect, but if you have to, it's just the truth. And as you probably saw, I don't know how long I was talking there for, 5 minutes, whatever. I don't have it written out. I don't have a script. I'm just explaining why these things matter, because the difference between authentic selling and inauthentic selling, if you're selling inauthentically, what you're doing is being done for a reason that you can't reveal the reason because you're doing it as a manipulation or as a tactic. When you're selling authentically, what I'm doing on the face is exactly the same as what I'm doing on the inside. There's no difference between what I'm doing and what I'm thinking and feeling and intending. And so the good thing about that is if you ever do get stuck on a sales call, you just explain to the prospect what you're doing. Because if you're truly selling genuinely, then you just tell them why you're not telling them the price or why you're still asking them questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I
Okay.
think,
So
sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, I think just like not only you saying like that these are the things that you have to cover, but like also if the prospect needs to be made aware, like that's fine too. Definitely makes a lot of sense because I feel like I'm getting towards the end of a discovery and I'm like I have no clue if the person that I'm talking to, like after I pitch them, is gonna sign up or not. And it's probably because I'm not hitting all these things. So like I'm just as clueless as they are if they're going to sign up at the end of it or not.
Yeah, you should be getting to the end of the call and in your mind thinking, what we've discussed would completely obliterate any concerns with this prospect that they trust me. What we've discussed would completely obliterate or make negligent the $3,000 investment. What we've already discussed is so honest and so truthful that they can no longer hide blindly behind their excuses and their rationalizations. You should be getting to the end of the discovery and knowing not that they're going to buy because you don't control them, but in your mind it's like we've had such a conversation that any of the reasons for them to not buy are in my mind gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. And so, as far as the urgency, which was the original thing, it really comes first from the depth of the pain or the depth of the situation, whether that's directly pain or just what's actually going on. Once you've got all of that and you're like, okay, the consequences to their family, to their kids, to their wife, to their financial prosperity, to their mental health, to their spiritual health, to living the life experiences that they're not going on because they're overweight and they don't want to travel for whatever reason. Once you've got all of that severity, it's very simple to just lay it all out as a summary. Okay, so there's this, and this. Is that accurate? Yes. Got it. So what I'm wondering is, have you gotten to the point where you're no longer willing to live life like this? Yes. That's the transition to urgency. Have they gotten to a point? You don't have to phrase it exactly how I said it. You could say, okay, so blank, 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 we're now on the phone to do something about this. Why now? Same thing. It's a transition. Why now? Have you gotten to the point? Any particular reason, having run this cycle for 18 months, that you're now booking in a call to resolve this? Why? Okay. Transition. Once we hit the transition, the urgency is tying it down. They say, yes, I need to do something about it now. That's not enough. Why now? Well, because of blank. But why because of that? Okay, why is that important? And you're running another mini discovery once you've transitioned, just as when they tell you what the problem is, you're probing and you're clarifying and you're going deeper and deeper into all of those things. The same depth needs to happen once you transition into urgency. You can't just say, are you going to do something about it now? And they say yes. And you say, okay, cool. That's not enough. You have to do the same diagnosis into, okay, I know why. Now I need to know why now to the same degree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I can think of a specific call this week where she said like there was something that she's missing out on once a month because she, doesn't feel comfortable going into it. And I said, how much longer? And she said not another month. And I was like, cool. Like in my mind, like got it, and I didn't go any deeper on that. Like, oh, not another month. Cool. Like move
Yeah,
forward.
so let's role play that as an example then, and I'll just guess I understand the situation. Okay, well, you've been missing this thing for the last 6 months, so why now all of a sudden, if you are you not willing to miss one more month?
Because I really enjoy going hiking and it's really embarrassing for me to turn it down when my friends ask me to go.
Why is that embarrassing?
Because it's all so they could all do it and I can't do it. And if I were to go with them, I definitely would hold them back and I'd probably ruin the whole thing for everyone.
And so what I'm curious about is knowing that you can't do this and knowing that you would hold everyone back if you even attempted to invite yourself. What's different this month compared to the last 6 months?
Well, this month I didn't go with them as I usually don't, but I'll usually go with my boyfriend. And this month, when me and my boyfriend went on a hike, I couldn't even keep up with him anymore. And
Okay.
I used to, be comfortable doing it with my boyfriend, and I would just be too uncomfortable going with that group of friends. But now I'm even uncomfortable going with him.
Okay. And so what I'm curious about then is what's different to you had these friends. Were these female friends?
Yeah.
Okay. So you had female friends, and up until this month, you were either going with them but holding them back, or you didn't go. But with your female friends, that was not enough for you to need to do something about this. Why is it different now it's your boyfriend? Do you see what I'm doing, Faith? Like, I'm still like, explain it to me until you tell me it's not, oh, 6 months I didn't go, or I went hiking and I held people back, or I didn't go. And then now all of a sudden I'm not willing to not do that another time. Okay, boom, check. No, that's not enough. Okay, well, why? Well, I was going and now I'm not going. Okay, so what did you do instead? Oh, I went with my boyfriend. Okay, and then what happened? Well, the same thing happened with him, and listen to the rationalization. The same thing happened. The same thing happened with him that had with my girlfriends. Well, if it's the same thing, then why are we on the call? You see the rationalization. Oh, it's the same thing. No, it's not, because for 6 months you didn't do anything when you held your female friends back. But now the one time, the first time, the only time that you go with your boyfriend, you're immediately, I need to do something about this. Why? What's different? Well, he's my boyfriend. So, and then we would go another 7 layers deeper until she turns around and says, you know what? This is very far fetched, but just to give a extreme example. Well, you know what? My boyfriend and I, we met when we were in high school. And at high school, he was like the attractive high school football player, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that I was punching above my weight and I never thought I was going to be able to be with him. But for whatever reason, he decided that he liked my personality. And so he's with me. And through our entire relationship for the last 10 years, he's really athletic. He loves doing his sports. And it's something that I've always seen has been a challenge for him because I'm not very sporty. Okay, how do you mean a challenge? Well, I can see that he wishes I could do these activities with him, but I can't. Has he ever said anything? No. Okay, so how do you know it bothers him? Well, I can see blank, blank, blank. And then we get into some juicy stuff about, if I'm being honest with you, Faith, at the moment, I feel like he might actually be entertaining other women. Why do you feel that? Well, he never used to be, hiding his phone, and then now all of a sudden he's hiding his phone. Okay, so how does this connect to hiking? Well, I feel like if I literally let myself go to the point where I can't even go for a walk with him, not playing pro basketball, but going for a walk, I think he might leave me for another woman. Huh. How does that make you feel if tomorrow, you see how we're now getting into what is it costing right now, not the future or the past? How is it going to feel tomorrow to wake up again and see your boyfriend looking at his phone, potentially opening the door to other women, knowing that the reason that he's doing that is because something that you were aware of that was so important to him, which is fitness, is something that you've willingly neglected to maintain in your life? How, and you see how I flipped it from pain and victim? You don't want someone in pain and victim. Pain and your fucking fault.
Yeah.
Not how's it going to feel when you wake up and you see him texting other women. Oh, it's so bad. And she cries her eyes out. And then at the end of the call, she's like, oh, it's $9,000. I'm not going to buy. And she won't tell you why. But the reason why, she'd be thinking, well, my boyfriend's the asshole. It's not my fault. No. It is your fault. It might not be a nice thing. It might not be the right thing if that's what the boyfriend was doing, but it's still your fault that you contributed to that situation. So, going back to the summary, you say something to the effect of, how are you going to feel tomorrow waking up again, knowing that you had this phone call? This could have been the first step to you actually not just saving your body weight, but saving the relationship that you've had with your high school sweetheart for the last 20 years by actually caring enough about him that you take care of your fitness so that you can actually do the minimal amount of joint activities of something that's important to him. Let's break down the 6 things that I said before. Is she going to trust me? Or is she going to be like, who's this fucking stranger? No, she's going to fucking trust me because nobody else is talking to her that specifically, that honestly, that deeply, and that intelligently. Is she going to worry about $3,000 compared to a 20-year relationship with her high school sweetheart? Fuck no. Is she going to have the realization that she didn't have before of how serious this is? Of course she is. Is she going to actually decide to go from no action in a completely different direction to massive action in another direction? Yes, because otherwise she's going to lose her high school sweetheart. Rationalizing, excuses, objections, all the same thing. So the urgency comes from having that deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper conversation. The urgency just appears. It's like, oh, well, the urgency is she's going to wake up tomorrow seeing him texting other women, potentially, and knowing that she isn't doing anything about it. She still is contributing, or we could even be very extreme to her and say, you're willingly pushing him to do that. Because he's probably, and I would have asked this question, I would have said, does he think that you know that he likes doing physical fitness activities? She says, well, yeah, he's always expressed that. So let me ask you a question. How do you think your boyfriend feels knowing that he knows that you know that he likes these activities and you are not taking care of your health and just ignoring the things that are important to him? How do you think he feels about your love for him, your care for him, your consideration? Now she's like, fuck me, no one's ever asked me that question in that way. Now the urgency is just going to come because she's thinking, I'm contributing to my boyfriend thinking these negative things about me because he loves fitness. I know he loves fitness. He knows I know that he loves fitness. And yet I can't even weigh my Rice Krispies in the morning so that I don't get fat. And so now we've had this whole conversation that just obliterates no urgency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think kind of like you said, just that going those layers deeper. I think when I was looking at my call earlier today, like I was trying to look for like where did I miss out on that urgency? And like where could I have asked that how much longer question? And I almost had a hard time finding where to even put that how much longer question. I think it was because I couldn't find a spot where I had gone deep enough where it would even make sense to tie it together and ask that.
And the key thing that you said there is I'm trying to put it somewhere. The moment you're trying to put a question into a sales call, you're not detached enough and you're not curious enough to just constantly keep asking why. I don't understand that. Explain that. Why is that important? Why did that happen? How did that happen? If you're thinking, okay, I need to get to some placement where I can pop that question in, you're gonna cause your own self to run into a roadblock. I'm not trying to find where do I put the how much longer question in. I just know it's in my head. And by leading with curiosity, at some point, I'm going to be like, holy shit, we've covered the 6 things, the money, the trusting me, the rationalizing. And it's so glaringly obvious that the seesaw has all of a sudden tipped. I'm just going to ask, how much longer are you going to continue doing that to your boyfriend? How much longer are you going to continue risking jeopardizing your 20-year relationship because you aren't taking care of your fitness and therefore you actually aren't taking care of your partner because he cares about fitness, he cares about you, and you not caring about your fitness, which is something that he cares about, is probably telling him a message that you don't care about him. So how much longer are you going to communicate that message to him through your lack of action committing to getting in shape? You see how my questions are all tied into the context as well. That's why you can't even do this with a script. Like how the fuck would you put all of that into a scripted question? You can't do it.
Yeah.
All I know is my goal is get to something that's deep enough and true enough that those 6 things they're counterbalanced by how deep we've gone. And then it's just how much longer. Okay, well, why? And you just keep going and going and going and going. And as you do this enough times, instead of having to go 15 questions down into the pain and 15 questions down into the urgency, you get to a point where you do it in 10. And then you get to a point where you do it in 7 questions. Then you get to a point where you can do it in 5 questions. So to begin with, you have to keep digging and digging and digging because you're practicing curiosity and leading your questions with curiosity. After you've done this a while, you'll start to be able to orchestrate the conversation much quicker, more streamlined. But for now, anytime you get to something and you don't ask another 3, 4, 5 questions, that's when you're losing the opportunity to create the urgency, or to, it's not even create, it's to reveal the urgency. You don't create urgency, you reveal something that is significant enough to be urgent. You don't create the urgency. It's like someone saying, I'm going to create a sunny day when it's a cloudy day. So you don't create the sun. The sun's always there. You just have to remove the clouds and then the sun's there. The urgency is there if you remove all of the lack of clarity that someone has about their pain and the consequences and the severity, and their rationalizing and their excuses and how that means nothing, how the thing that they want to solve is so much more important than $3,000 or $9,000. The sun is always there. You don't create urgency. You just lead with curiosity and dig and reveal and reveal. And then it's like, oh, well, this is pretty fucking urgent. But just because it's become apparent that it's urgent, you still have to ask them, are you going to go another day with this? No? Okay, well, why not? Yeah, but you don't create urgency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like we were talking about last week with the burning problem. Like I can't create someone's burning problem. Like they either have it or they don't. Like it's my job to figure it out or to give them the space to go figure it out. So same thing with this. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm not creating urgency, but it's like it's not my job to create urgency. It's my job to find find the urgency if there is urgency.
Yeah, it's literally your job to just talk about what's going on and what impact the things that are going on are having to the person right now. And if the things that are going on are not having an impact to the person right now, then there is no urgency. You can't just create urgency.
Mhm.
Urgency is like air. Like you can't grab it. There's no urgency. The urgency just happens as a result of the specificity of the problem. There's a massive problem. Okay, well, if it's a massive problem, it's probably urgent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. How do you feel now?
I feel like I came in thinking like, how do I create urgency? And now I feel like the answer is I'm just need to go layers deeper into pain and like you said, uncover the urgency that's there, if that makes sense.
And how is that sitting with you?
Well, in one sense, it's almost easier. Like it's easier than trying to create urgency. Like me just uncovering the problem is a lot easier than me trying to create urgency.
Yeah.
In that sense, it's definitely relieving. And I think in the other sense, it's just like you said, practicing. Like on my next call, like am I gonna go from no urgency to 100% urgency? Like no, it's probably gonna take me practicing, how to go those layers deeper. And then also just being, I don't want to say comfortable, but being okay with just asking the uncomfortable and digging, which I think is something that I still feel a little awkward about.
Why do you feel awkward about that?
I don't know. I think it's just like, I think I'm worried about maybe coming across as like, oh, she's asking me this because she just like, I don't know if I'm worried about coming across as salesy, but if someone says something and I'm just like, why? Like sometimes I feel a little bit uncomfortable digging because I don't want them to feel like I'm like trying to take advantage of what they just said.
So what's the alternative?
Not ask and not help them
Which do you feel more uncomfortable with?
if they left my call without getting the help they needed.
Why do you say that when your actions could be saying the opposite?
Because I know what it feels like for me to not help someone and them to get off a call because I didn't do the right thing and knowing like I could have helped them, but instead they're probably going to go the rest of their life without getting the help that they need.
And so What did you mean when you said I didn't know what it feels like?
I do know what it feels like for them to, I do know what it feels like to, for them to get off a call. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm confused. So let me explain where I'm confused. You said that you feel uncomfortable with asking those deeper questions because you don't want someone to feel like you're selling them or being salesy. Makes sense. I then said, well, what's the alternative? The alternative, as you clarified, is, well, I don't ask the questions. They don't buy. Forget buying. They don't get help and they stay in their situation. We're clear on that. I then said, well, which one are you more uncomfortable with? And you said the obvious one, which is, well, I'm more uncomfortable that they don't get help. That makes sense. But you asked the question because it didn't seem like you were in that mindset 3 minutes ago. So I'm curious, is that because you hadn't thought about it or you didn't know the consequence of you not asking those questions, or what changed in the last 3 minutes? Because it's like the phrase, don't watch what people say, watch what people do. You said the right thing. You said, well, I feel more uncomfortable with them not getting help. Well, if that were the case, then why did you have more uncomfortableness with asking the questions you have to ask? I'm confused where the misalignment is.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking. I think I'm I'm uncomfortable or I feel a little bit awkward. I'm trying to like ask them regardless of how I'm feeling, to an extent, but I guess so it's not like I'm feeling uncomfortable, so I'm not asking at all. Like I am, but maybe only going one or two layers deep and then stopping rather than going as deep as kind of everything we just talked about. Why I'm stopping early, I think maybe it's a mix of still feeling a little bit uncomfortable and a mix of also just not being sure how much farther I should go for it to be like a reason to keep going deeper, if that makes sense.
Okay, makes total sense. After the chat that we've had, where is your level of clarity on knowing now how much further you need to go, how much deeper you need to go?
Clarity is an 8 or a 9.
Okay. Why is it not a 10? What is missing?
I think the only thing missing for me is like how will like I think it'll be a feeling that I'll have when I get deep enough to ask like how much longer are you willing to, blank, blank, blank. I think that, like you said, it's not something that I could necessarily plan for or try to put somewhere. And kind of based on just how you were explaining it, I think it'll be something that I'll feel and I might not have felt it before. So that's why I'm not confident because I think once I feel it, then it would put me to a 10.
That makes complete sense. And it's 100% accurate because what you are subconsciously looking for, like everybody, is just tell me when to say the question, how to say it, when to say it, exactly when. And people, that's why scripted selling is a mass market product, because 99% of people, they want a cookie cutter, you know, teacher says jump, you say how high. Well, you can live that life if you want, but you're never going to be exceptional. One of the big, and I know we didn't even get to the internal stuff, but this is an internal thing. One of the big internal transitions from being someone that is average and will always be average and will also, quite frankly, be poor, not just poor financially, but poor in spirit, poor in the impact they have in the world, and someone that becomes legendary in their industry, someone that has a massive impact, someone that has a massive aura, someone that carries a very powerful skill, is moving away from everything needing to be logical and starting to lean into trusting faith. Well, that's your name, ironically, but in other words, not looking for when do I say the thing, but I'm going to feel it and I'm just going to trust that I'm going to feel it. That transition psychologically is one of, if not the fundamental difference between people that become legends. If you ever talk about, if you ever see people speaking to people like Michael Jordan, the basketball player, or musicians that have written incredible music, especially musicians that played a solo live and it became famous, or artists, they never say, oh, I knew to do this thing at this time in this way. They were like, in the moment, I just felt it. I just felt it and I went with it. That's the difference between people that are forgotten and just, disappear, and people that become timeless. The people that become timeless do things that are timeless. And what is timeless? It's not logic, it's faith. The only place where timelessness exists is in the quantum realm where things are not logical. In the logical realm, it's, oh, at this time for this duration in this way. That's time. Timelessness, becoming someone that's timeless, you have to be someone that lives in a timeless way, which is moving from the logic and moving into I'm an 8 out of 10 because I'm just gonna have to feel it when I feel it. Beautiful. Great answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm a very logical person, which maybe has served me well up to this point. But even with what you're saying, like moving away from the logic, like I'm sure as you've seen like my posts, like the whole like non-logical side of things, the manifesting the 40, like all that stuff has definitely been things that I don't know, I want to say struggling with, but like, yeah, struggling to like flex that muscle, or it's been hard for me to get into, I think, because I've always been leaned so towards the logical side of things.
Yeah. So do you remember one of the previous trainings we did, and it's now on YouTube, where it was Victoria was talking about having her boundaries challenged by a prospect. And what she specifically wrote in the post was, it's hard. In other words, it's hard for me to hold my boundaries. And that post created a whole rant and a whole training on what is hard for you to do personally is your hero or heroine's journey. In other words, if the big thing for you that's the hardest thing, and it might not be this, but just as an example that we're talking about, is moving away from being a person that everything is logical, that's the hero's journey that you're on. If you imagine a timeline where you've got the version of faith that you are now, and then you've got the version of faith that is your highest potential, and the only variable that we're going to look at now is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being 100% spiritual and 0 being 100% logical, where would the future version of faith sit on that scale that's the best version of you? Is it going to be the faith where everything's logical? No, it's going to be the version of faith that is like, I let things happen and flow to me from a place of spiritual abundance, spiritual energy. And so your timeline and your trajectory of you evolving as a person, one of the changes in your psychology, the way you live your life, will be moving into a version of you that's more tuned in, or we could say more letting go, and therefore falling more into a spiritual place. What it's why I've got a whole completely other video on it on YouTube. What closers forget is that closing sales is just a vehicle where the rubber meets the road for your personal development journey. If you want to become better and you are someone that's super logical, you're going to have to let go of that part of you that's overly logical. It's being very logical is very similar to being a perfectionist, can serve you in many ways, but to become someone that's legendary, they're not perfectionists in the sense of when it's game time, they've done all of the practice to be a perfectionist, but when it's game time, they just flow. They're just in the moment. Is that clear?
Yeah, yeah, without getting, all into it. I think that kind of answered what I was having a hard time with internally was, like you mentioned, just letting things flow and letting things happen. And my internal side of things was just like how anxious I am getting before every call. But I think it could be because I'm trying to make things happen. Therefore, I'm anxious before versus just like letting things happen and letting things flow to me, which would probably solve all my anxiety.
It definitely would. And it's funny that, and I didn't intend it to be this way, but when we started the call, you said you had an external problem, a sales problem, and an internal problem. If you go deep enough into any of the skill-based problems, they are internal anyway. It just on the surface, it feels like, oh, how do I create urgency? It's like, it's probably not the problem. The problem is you need to let go and trust yourself and have more faith in your ability to, in real time, connect with the human and ask questions and be curious and understand because you'll feel it. Oh, wow, we've just got to something really serious, really significant. There's a bunch of need for this person to do this, need being urgency. I'm just going to ask them, how much longer are you going to live life like this? And then the questions will just flow to you because you're in the moment. So even though it was a how do I create urgency question, it's now gone into an internal thing, which it always will. If you go deep enough, it always will. And
Yeah.
that's one of the most beautiful things with scriptless selling as your methodology is if you go deeper into the scriptless selling stuff, you find that whatever your scriptless selling problem is an internal problem. And that's a good thing because the best thing you can do in life is be on an internal development journey, not an external development journey. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've ever seen that, the highest one is self-actualization. It's not how do I have a better roof over my head or better food. That's a very mundane life if that's all you're living. The highest version is realizing that every external problem you have is transmuted into an internal problem that, if resolved, will not only mean the external problem just evaporates, but you're now a better version of yourself as well because you focused on the internal side, which is why the problem then evaporated. And so, if the methodology that someone's using is scripts, they don't get that luxury of evaporating the external problem and having an internal development at the same time. They just refine their script and they're like, okay, well, I'm refining my script. It doesn't matter if your script says, a question that supposedly gets urgency. We could just say the script says why now, because when they ask the why now, like you did, and the prospect says, oh, because of blank reason, the scripted closer just sees, okay, I can tick that question off. I got the answer. So the script didn't solve the problem. The problem was an internal problem that you didn't know how to feel when you'd actually had a real conversation. And you never will develop that ability and the ability to let go of the need to logically know when you've had a deep enough conversation if all you're doing is learning scripts. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's very clear. It's like I feel like it's like a light bulb, like mind blowing moment that I would have never connected like my external leak connecting to my internal leak. And like you said, it's, not only an internal leak when it comes to sales, but it's your whole personal development. So like, yeah, the fact that I'm super logical, like I don't think anyone would ever guess like, oh, Faith must internally be a really anxious person because on the outside it's like logical, blah, 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 checklist, got this, right? And so the fact that even just tying my question like, oh, how do I create urgency? Like, how do I make this happen? How do I like, I'm trying to do everything instead of letting things happen. So it's not only in sales, but I could see how that logicalness in general and everything else is leading to, yeah, like just a generalized anxiety of me trying to make things happen.
Yeah. And because sales is just a random external vehicle, when you work on this as a universal internal thing, which is moving away from being logical, it will transfer into all areas of your life. Whereas if all you were doing is saying, hey, Josh, I've got my sales script, I'm not getting enough urgency. What do I put on the script to get more urgency? Even if there was a question I could put in, we fix that, but nothing else in your life is going to change. Whereas if you imagine, and I would go to bed tonight and think about this, if you imagine the version of faith that is a version that is much, much, much less logical and is much more has much more trust in yourself from the inside rather than the logic on the outside. In other words, I know I'm going to know and I'm going to feel it. Visualize that version of you tonight and not imagine, visualize that version of you tonight and allow your mind to wander as far as like, what would your house look like? What would your relationship look like? What would your day-to-day schedule look like? And just have the centering point be the version of faith that is much more, let's just call it spiritual. And what is the rest of your life going to look like if that was the version of you that you were living? Because I guarantee you it would be completely different. And when you step into that reality, you will feel something. And most probably what you'll feel will be the absolute opposite of the anxiety that you feel right now. It will be a sense of peace and a sense of relaxation, a sense of calm. And what you will then connect for another light bulb moment for you is that peace, that calm, that relaxation didn't come from the external changes in your life, the better house or the different house or whatever the changes are. You became the different version of faith that chose a new way to live that therefore gave you that relaxation, calm, and peace. And therefore, all of the things outside of you changed. In other words, it would allow you to stop chasing external things, thinking they may change some anxiety or whatever, and realize that, oh, if I actually just change me, I'll no longer have the anxiety, but I'll also then have a completely different lifestyle on the outside. So it's flipping the chicken and the egg the other way up and realizing one comes before the other, not the other way around. Is that clear?
Yeah. Yeah. I like everything you just said. Like there's so many instances. Like one, that faith is probably like a faith that I don't even know, which is like scary, but also like exciting because it's like probably a long journey, but it'll be a journey that's so worth it. And then I think the second thing that you said, just flipping things around, like, yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, like, am I anxious because like, I don't have enough, I don't have everything I want, or I don't have enough money to get all the things I want. So maybe that's what's causing me to be anxious. Like, oh, once I have that, then my anxiousness will go away versus like the other way around, like you said.
Yeah. If you become the version of faith that is not needing everything to be logical, then the money will flow to you. I mean, we could even play it out very literally. The version of faith that needs everything to be logical not only wasn't asking the deeper questions because she wanted everything to be logical and wasn't sure when she's going to know when she's gone deep enough, also had a logical rationalization in your mind, which is, well, I'm afraid to go deeper because I don't want the prospects to think I'm selling them. As a result of that, in the last week alone, lost 5 deals. So even if we just connect everything together logically, that's why you don't have more money. The version of faith that is more connected into, I trust myself, I'm going to let go, I'm going to feel it in the moment, I'm going to just have a conversation, be curious, ask questions. When I know we've gone deep enough, I'll feel it, and then I'm going to ask the how much longer question. That version of faith over the next 7 days is going to have those 5 calls, go deeper on all of those calls, probably close most, if not all of those calls, and then make more money. So the money comes as a result of who you choose to show up to be as the version of you on those sales calls.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense.
Beautiful. Do you have any questions or any thoughts or any takeaways?
I think my biggest takeaway is just it's so much more interconnected than I would have thought. Just whether it's my external links here or anywhere else, like just so much more connected to the internal side of things and I guess what's going on internally. And so I do feel like it's like a very light bulb moment for me to realize like these aren't independent things. They're very much connected.
Yep, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that will help you significantly. If you need any further help, just send me a message on school. If you have any realizations tomorrow after you've gone to bed tonight or on your calls this week, obviously just post it in school. And I will see you on Friday, unless you have anything more you want to add.
No, I'm excited, and I think this week I'm going to be very curious to see just like where my anxiety and my state is going into calls, having kind of connected everything together. So thank you.
My pleasure. All right, Faith, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Yeah.
All right. So you just watched me do a one-on-one call with one of the students inside the Unicorn Closer Mastermind, coming to me thinking that she had an external issue. I don't know how to create urgency. I'm not creating urgency. I'm losing deals. I'm losing money because I'm not creating urgency. And as you saw, and as Faith shared with us both at the end, you don't have an external issue. You have an interconnected issue with all of your internal things. Now, this training specifically was on creating urgency. I'll tell you now, whatever objection or sales leak or issue you're having in your high ticket closing journey that you think is external is always going to come down and be rooted to a much deeper internal issue. If you watched me do that one-on-one and you have now realized, damn, it is costing me a lot to not handle my internal leaks. It is costing me a lot to not understand sales on a much deeper level, to not understand what sales really is. What is the philosophy of true salesmanship, true art, craft, and science of closing. If you're watching and you're realizing the amount of money that you're flushing down the table, and more importantly, the lack of internal personal growth that you are not making because you have not got access to training like this, you are not a part of a deeper training, which is sales training and internal personal development training, the question is, how much longer are you going to sacrifice both internally and externally your potential? How many more days are you going to sit on the fence watching others get results, watching other closers win, watching other closers not just make more money, but become more competent, more serious, more professional, more powerful, more abundant, more peaceful, more joyful, more relaxed, more calm, more clear versions of themselves until you take action and join the Unicorn Closer Mastermind? How many more days? I'll see you soon.